right, so I guess we'll jump into it. Maybe it'd be good to kind of introduce yourselves individually and kind of go from there.
Most definitely, Daymon Green, born and raised in Toronto, living back and forth in New York and Toronto, basically traveling the world trying to discover new lifestyle and culture.
My name is Desmond Hill. I was Daymon Green's partner in Lounge and Greenhill and a few other endeavors at that time. I actually kind of cut my teeth more into wholesale and then eventually went on to do law, which I just finished now. But that's overall. I've lived in a couple of countries as well to keep it interesting.
Perfect. Talk to us, or tell our audience a bit about Lounge. You guys started Lounge in 1994, one of the first streetwear brands, if not the first streetwear retail company store in the country. Kind of, what was the impetus to starting it, and how did that all come about?
Burning since '89 was like the motto for the brand, and that's actually when me and Desmond met and started burning. The brand started, I would say, in about '92. We opened a store on Yonge Street, north of Lawrence. Changed names a couple times because we got sued, and eventually became Lounge, and then eventually moved to Queen and John. That's where most people know us from that time period.
Very famous location.
Yeah, that being across from Much Music, working with Baby Blue Sound Crew, Bishop, doing a lot of music stuff, working with Rockaware, yada yada. It was really like the sort of epicenter of, and kind of that's why we use the hashtag Lounge Academy now, because some pretty incredible talent came out of that building.
And streetwear at that time, I mean, was it an easy and obvious kind of concept to start off, or were you guys kind of very niche, kind of like the days of Vice when they had just that newspaper pub?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't started because of nowadays I think that people know that or at least for the last few years, that there's money in it. It was really just all lifestyle based, and it came from the music scene, originally hip hop, and then Des really got more into the reggae scene, and then so the music motivated the clothing. But in those days, you called it urban. Urban's now a very bad word, and then when urban got turned into a bad word, people came up with streetwear.
Gotcha.
And then you could even talk about skirban, which is actually skate.
Okay.
And urban,
which would be like that Lil Wayne, DC Shoes, Supra.
Yes. Okay. Which is massive now.
Right, and it kind of blurred the lines, right? Because it was like Lil Wayne at the time was your pinnacle hip hop artist, who he kind of shunned all the typical urban brands and gravitated towards a skate brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like he would say, I don't think Supra's done better since, or I don't think Supra's had anything really since that run, outside of on a full international, like in terms of skate, of course they've always had their crowd, but being on an international level and selling like how they did, DC Shoes, made him even start his own brand, Truck Fit, which kind of blurred the lines, you know what I mean? It was, I guess, a little bit more urban, or brought things back full circle, but there's many cycles that we could talk about in the clothing.
And music it sounds like it's always been an important part of it. I mean, music was inspiring fashion. Fashion was obviously borrowing from music. Was that always kind of intertwined with Lounge? I mean, was music always kind of part of the business? Because you guys also ran, I think it was Greenhill?
Yes.
Yeah, and that was a music-related venture.
Yeah, I mean, we promoted the Hard Knock Life Tour, which was the first concert ever at ACC.
Wow, first hip-hop concert at ACC?
First concert. Correct.
Wow. Jay-Z did the first concert at ACC.
Correct. Yes, they literally had like an opening event, and then later that week was the Hard Knock Life Tour was scheduled.
Wow.
And then that's where our management stuff came in with, and then Baby Blue Sound Crew happened. I mean, to back up, music, at least from my life, is I can't live without music. The idea of working in an office that's like pin quiet is like my idea of my definition of insanity. I need music constantly. Yeah. So everything for me starts with music, and then the music spawned the lifestyle. But when we started, I'm discounting when we started now, because if you start, if you say, oh, I've been around for 400 years, people are like, you're irrelevant. So I'm like, 5 years ago, but really, anyone with a calculator can do the math.
Yeah.
It's a little while ago. There wasn't really, people weren't making product specifically for the lifestyle. It was just like you were making product, but you were inspired by the lifestyle.
It's funny you mention that, because I always remember we had an interview one time with Master T, and the funniest thing at that time when he interviewed...
Big up Master T.
Yes, big up Master T. He was probably...
Yeah.
Anytime we had clothing or anything, he was probably our most recognized personality in clothing.
And he's right across the street.
Well, yeah.
Right across the street.
It was convenient for him, too.
I mean, Master T was a mentor. Like he was like an older dude. He was like a I didn't even know what a mentor was at that point, but he was a mentor. And at the same time, we would outfit him for his clothing. Funny story was, so he'd wear clothing and bring it back.
Okay.
And one time,
it's common practice. No,
it's pretty normal.
We can say that. We can say that.
It's pretty normal. I wouldn't have said it back in the day.
At the time, it didn't happen.
And I'll never forget, someone bought a pair of lounge jeans, and they called the store back and they said, "Hey, I got these jeans and there's a credit card in there. It says Tony Young on it. I don't know what the deal is." They were like, "Oh, can you bring that back, please?" But we also styled Lauryn Hill. That was Master T's last show.
Wow.
We got to style Lauryn Hill for that, and via working with Master T, that connected us to, some of the biggest names in music, and having much music across the street meant that Kanye West, DMX, Dr. Dre, whoever it was, would come through, because it wasn't hard. It was like Master T would basically walk them across the street. So much love and respect for that gentleman.
And you guys even back then were building a community. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to go to lounge and see people there, not just shopping, but hanging out or using it as a launching point to do something. It seemed to be like if you were going to meet up in the city, people had said, "I'll meet you at lounge."
Well, that was the internet before the internet. So for all you kids out there that can't imagine a time when you couldn't research things, like how did you research lifestyle or culture or what parties were going on, or it was as simple as lounge was like, "Yo, I'm going downtown. Cool. Where are we gonna meet? We'll meet at lounge." Mm-hmm. So yeah, the community angle, which has been my life for the last 7 years, happened naturally. And it's funny because another very major pioneer in the industry in Canada and one of the most respected guys in the scene, Little X, when he came to my store in New York at one point, he came to the community and he was hanging out at a party and he pulled me aside and he said, "You guys don't, you've had stores your whole life?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "But they're not really stores." And if you've ever talked to X, you know that he's a very spiritual, very deep guy. Mm-hmm. He'll never have a, "Hey, what up?"
Yeah.
You always have a really amazing conversation with him. And he basically broke down that at least my career, and including with Des, was always way more about a community center vibe than a store.
Wow. Which is very popular now. I mean, it seems like everybody wants to build a community. Everybody wants engagement. You guys were doing it. I don't know if you guys set out to do it or just naturally you guys always kind of had that mindset of community.
It needed to be organic, nonetheless, right? For us, anyways, it was organic, and I believe that's why it worked. In that we were in the community. I went out, he went out. We had DJs hanging out there. We had just normal personalities within the city. It just became an organic spot. Now, was it intended? No, but there were certain things again, to tie it back into music, we used to sell CDs, sell tickets. You're right. I guess can we say now that maybe some of the guys used to sell other stuff? Get out of the shop.
I mean, everyone assumes there's so many ways. There's so many ways that this story could veer off. Mm-hmm. And when me and Des started to get successful, and again, Desmond at the time, he's a lawyer now and looks very,
on the way
and looks very respectable. Not that he wasn't respectable back in the day, but because he had very long dreads and a beard, I actually wore a do-rag back in those days.
Nice.
Thank God Google wasn't around.
No Instagram then.
Thank God Google wasn't around. But when we would go to the bank, or we would, we had nice cars. We were early on that because we were making money before a lot of people. People just assumed that we were on that side of the game. Ironically, we weren't. Sidebar to the community angle, and I don't want to blow up Desmond's spot, but Desmond got in trouble at one point, and he had to spend some time in a place he didn't want to be. And when he went there, all anyone wanted to know was, and like the real dudes that he needed, like kind of look out for him where he was for a short period. Yeah. We could probably read between the lines. All it was like when we got Dez out, I'll never forget. He's like, yo, all anyone wanted to know is what new shit we had in town.
It was amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Wow.
It's true.
So like that's
saved my ass.
Okay.
That's ultimately
that's community, 100%.
That's community before, and again, because now you could almost be locked up, and hey, if you got a phone in there, you know exactly what, or they let you get your computer time, and you can be connected. Again, not long ago, you had to be living, you had to be a part of the scene. And no one was using community. I mean, even when we started community, I was talking about some of this today. Community wasn't a catchword or a buzzword or a phrase that now it's like every single, whether it's Loblaws or, AT&T, it's like community's part of their advertising.
It's true.
It's a real buzzword. And for us, 7 years ago, when we came up with the name, it happened naturally. And I know I'm veering off from lounge now to community, but to me, it all kind of blends together. And it came from so many people helping us and working with us to get the concept going. And we had no name. And me and my business partners were sitting having a meal, and it was like, what are we going to call this place? And then just community kept popping up.
Gotcha. And you're referring to Community 54, which is your current retail store.
Correct.
You have one on Ossington,
Right.
Parkdale. Before it was popular to be in Parkdale. Now everybody wants a spot in
100%.
Parkdale. And then in New York City too as well.
Correct. And I mean, really, it's become a brand. We do business in. Right now we have a collaboration with Fila in Korea. That's going to be going in all the Fila stores out there. We have a huge following in Japan, and like that comes from, I think it's that community vibe, that real, like it's not a corporate entity. Gotcha. It's real, it's DIY, so like the cultures that get that really vibe on that get with what we do. So it's like, it's hard to call it a store, and it was hard to call Lounge a store, and I think that's where like that was where his vibe came in. And you'd think after 20 years of running stores, I would really know how to do it. And I think that the operations is probably the least part that I enjoy or that I'm good at. But the building community and vibing with people and people connecting at these spaces and going on to do big things or going on to collaborate.
Yeah.
And the fact that now they'll shout me out or say like, you put me on, or you looked out. I mean, I had a real estate agent the other day basically say, and I never told Dez this story yet, that seeing me and Dez operate our business, and this now goes back to Podcast Cannabis, seeing us run our business at the same time pretty well being stoned the whole time, inspired him and showed him that he could be a businessman and also smoke weed.
That's very interesting. I mean, now it's like, it's so common. People accept the fact that, whether you're doing it for therapeutic or medical purposes or even just recreational, that there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, 5 years ago, there's a lot of stigma attached to it. So, was cannabis a big part of it? I mean, it's always been a big part of hip hop. Was it a pronounced part of kind of your guys' retail experience?
It was amazing. I don't think we did a collection that didn't have at least one weed t-shirt to it. To this day, still one of our best, I would say, was the Legalize It. Mm-hmm. It was legalized. Relax, it's just weed on the back. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that was 2002.
Okay.
But I mean, we rented an office across the street from the store, which, because it had a patio. Okay. And why was the patio essential? And I look back now and I say, Community 54 in Toronto has a huge backyard. Community 54 in New York has a huge backyard.
Yeah.
Lounge didn't have a backyard because it was really small.
Yeah.
So we rented an office across the street to have a patio.
Wow.
What was the purpose of the patio? Do you want to guess?
Yeah, I'm assuming for people to hang out, listen to music, and smoke weed.
Pretty well.
Yeah.
And it got to the point that if you wanted it to get at me or Desmond, you probably wouldn't be able to get at us via the store.
Gotcha.
You know, and you probably couldn't get us on an email. I don't even know if we had emails. You probably never.
Hip Tops.
Hip Top. Yes, I remember the.
Hip Hop.
This guy never answered his phone. He wouldn't pick up the phone from me. But if you wanted to find us, you'd come to the patio.
Gotcha. And that's where you guys were hanging out.
Well, and it's like, as wild as that sounds, all of our best ideas, all of our best concepts. We did a lot of work on the patio.
Wow.
Between his patio, the patio and his living room, kitchen, whatever.
Yeah.
That's where we did like when we were Davisville, I'm talking. 77 Davisville. After work, we used to go to his house.
Your apartment.
Right. But when it was still his apartment, we used to go up there, maybe stop to grab something to smoke, and then consistently smoke till we were blue in the face. And write down a bunch of ideas. Like some of our best ideas and plans came up because of cannabis directly.
And that's like music. I mean, you hear that from entertainers or creatives, period, all the time. That is a huge driver for creativity. And it was for you guys, even in the fashion space.
Yeah, but it was really looked upon as the opposite, you know. And to this day, still a lot of people would assume that if you smoke a ton of weed, you're probably not getting much work done.
Which is not true. I mean, and there's a lot of studies that are coming out that are showing that there's no basis.
I think it depends on the person, and I think it probably depends on the kind of weed you're smoking too.
Very true.
It's funny, but one of the biggest deals that we did was like I literally outed it right as I walked in, and it's because we had a transition where we started to become corporate.
Yeah,
we were working with Reebok, we were working with different record labels, House of Blues, and it just at that point, certain people, like obviously the House of Blues, they were cool, right? You come in there stinking a weed, it wasn't a big deal. Yeah. You go in to meet with Reebok or Hudson's Bay or Fila. That was the one I was talking about. But it was, again, I want to say it was part of the authenticity though, because we were there because we knew our side of things.
Gotcha. You guys knew the culture. You guys had a literally had a pulse of what was happening.
You didn't call it that. Like none of these buzzwords. You didn't say. If 12 years ago you were like culture, people would be like, what? And now people are calling their kids culture. It's like at the end of the day, community, culture, all these little urban streetwear. Like you just lived, and you did. Again, there was no blueprint. No one had done it before, and we, at least from my perspective, were just doing what we loved. And then that kind of like spawned, you know, all these other things. But again, to have a real estate agent like literally send you a message and be like, you and Desmond inspired me to understand that I could be a business person and a pothead at the same time. It was just and now, it's not a big deal.
Common, but you're right.
It's not as much of a big deal.
Yeah.
Different cultures in different places, it still is.
It's true. There's still a stigma.
There's still a stigma in different places, and ironically, like, you know, for me, my priorities have changed, and I definitely don't. You know, I haven't smoked flower in a minute. And I definitely, don't smoke as much as I did, but I'm still passionate about the lifestyle, and feel like everyone up for the most. I was about to say, and that's why I brought Desmond, because he has, even though he's far on his way to become a lawyer, and has
Well, that's another just proof to that, though. That
true.
Like I probably shouldn't be saying this, and if my old man hears this, he'd lose it. But you know what I mean? Like I don't know if I would have made it through law school without cannabis.
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, there's a lot of people who say they can't make it through a day. Like I have a friend who has really bad back pain, and cannabis helps him just to function.
It was for me as well too. It was I did the school in the UK, right? So I went over there by myself. I didn't really have anybody, so cannabis was kind of like that one familiarity in a strange land kind of thing.
A constant, right? That you kind of you knew,
right? But as well too, cannabis also has that cannabis community, right? So once you tap into that cannabis community, like one of my best friends or one of my closest people that I'm you know, over there in England, shout out Gabs, he's in Spain right now. It was through weed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The first night I was there, I heard him say, anybody smoke weed?
Yeah.
He saw me, he was like, hey, Canada, come. And 4 years later, me and him were, you know, best buds.
It's a very interesting statement. I mean, I think I've met a lot of friends through cannabis. Like it has a built-in community. I think more so, you know, kind of pre-legalization because it was illegal. So to find somebody,
network.
Yeah, it was a network. To find somebody that you could relate to at that level and feel safe with meant something. And it sounds like you guys almost created a safe space.
Well, that's
for people.
But the good thing about like I look back in those days and I say like, and Desmond's look at in those days, and he, you know, his name was the Dread. So it was like, when we traveled, like the biggest issue for anybody when they travel, if they don't know someone where they're going, is like, how am I going to get weed?
100%.
Right?
When I went to China, the same thing. How am I going to get weed?
And there you go under the jail. But at the end of the day, and you pay $150 for the shittiest weed you've ever seen in your life. But
sounds like you're talking from experience.
Yeah, I've been there, done that. But you know, Desmond's look, it was like, and his vibe and energy, the weed would just stick to him. It was like,
Come to you.
you know, a classic story was us on a
Vegas.
patio in Vegas.
Vegas, yes.
And, you know, we're just hanging out and we probably smoked all our weed and we were like fiending.
I think we were rolling.
This dude, you might have been rolling or rolling the last joint. And this dude comes over and we don't even really look at him. And he literally just throws a bag of weed at Des, the Dread at the time. And we look up, and he's like, yo, roll this thread.
Roll some of those.
And we look up, and it's Redman. Of all fucking
For real?
For real.
Like, and not Redman. And funny enough, I've gotten to know Redman now.
2003, 4, something like that.
Yeah,
This was a
like
while ago.
Redman at his peak. Like when Redman was a
fucking
friggin'
love Redman.
superstar.
Yeah, he was still a wild
Hard
boy.
Knock Life tour.
Yeah.
You know, and again, with Community, Red's shot videos with us. He supported us. He's a good friend of my business partner. I love that guy. But this is like way before he knew who the fuck we were.
Mm-hmm.
He just looked at this guy and said, yo, this guy knows how to roll.
This guy can roll the joint.
Blunt. And that was the best part. And then I look back and I'm like, my business partners I've always been with, like Desmond and now Jason, it's like they can roll really good. And believe it or not, to this, well, not even a criteria, it was something that was essential because I've never been good at that.
Gotcha.
And because probably I've always hung out with people that are really good at it, and that were like, yo, don't even fucking bother, bro. You're just gonna fuck it up.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I look back and I'm like, did I work with these guys because they were smart, business minded, or because they could roll an amazing backwoods?
To be fair, that is how we started, technically. It was me, you, and Scam. Like, if we're talking pre-lounge, like the Burning since '89 was me, him, and another. So there was another guy who used to hang with us, Scam, DJ Scam, who used to DJ on 88.1 on Saturday afternoon.
Pre-scam, what about, what's his name there? Jonathan
Oh, Supreme.
Supreme,
Yes.
who I saw ironically when they honored Oliver at the Design Exchange,
Yes, I saw you on
OVO.
that.
He was there doing the sound. He's even pre-fucking scam.
Yes.
Which is wild because that's where we originally.
That's how we all.
Power move.
Right, because he had the store and I used to work on the radio station. I was like answering the phone and I was like 17, 18 at that point. But we had this mutual school. He went to Northern, I went to North Toronto. Scam went to North Toronto.
Went is kind of a little
I attended. Oh, yes, I was registered. Hey, I was in the yearbook.
You probably went more than me.
I was in the yearbook. But through that, there was kind of alumni. Supreme actually used to go to Northern. Scam went to North Toronto. Big C went to Northern. So all of us were kind of hooked up through the radio station, and it was a little, I guess looking back now, it was kind of a clique.
That's what I met Thrust through.
Yeah.
That was that whole
Kish
was the early-
Kish used to go to North Toronto at that time too.
100%. These guys are gonna run out of. You guys have enough.
We have enough. We're good.
Enough tape. Already. He's like, only have a couple questions. You think you guys will have enough to talk about? Yeah.
But yeah, so there was that connection with. I think X even played the first lounge
I have pictures of that in the basement.
event.
That was 100 years ago. We won't say how long ago.
And those guys, like at that time, X was God in the city, right? Like he played. When I was rolling with X, we used to be out 4 or 5 times a week.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Playing.
Playing.
Yeah.
X was, like X gave up school at 16 because he was making more money than his teachers.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So it was an interesting time back
Big
then.
up DJ.
So you guys, I mean, you hinted to it a bit, but I mean, back in those times, you guys were almost a breeding ground for some very talented people that have kind of gone on to do many different things. I'm assuming that was a byproduct of the community.
Yeah, I mean,
You were able to maybe attract these outlier thinkers in many ways.
you know, at the end of the day, like that's why I've been playing around with this hashtag, and there isn't really many images on there. There's a couple, and I've been playing around with this Lounge Academy because in the States it's like Echo Unlimited.
Yeah.
Pretty well everybody, like from John Buscemi to like the dude from Crooks to like there's pretty well everybody that went on to be successful in streetwear worked at Echo.
Gotcha.
And Echo was their start because it was like the first hip-hop streetwear brand, and it spawned everybody. A Coltrane Curtis that owns Epiphany, so many people came out of that foundation. So for us, Lounge was the same thing. Why? Because there really wasn't anything else. Lounge, there wasn't any other culture-based concepts at the time in Canada, much less Toronto. So at the end of the day, it's only natural, and thank God that a lot of the people that came out of that are still in the industry and still doing big things. A couple of them have done extremely big things.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where now we're mentioned in, Lounge, even though it's been closed for 10 years?
Closed in 2008.
Okay. Closed in 2008. I moved to New York a little bit before that, but it still gets mentioned because of this certain gentleman who, when he gets interviewed in Billboard or he gets interviewed in GQ magazine or he's getting nominated at Design Exchange, he always mentions Lounge as his foundation.
And you're referring to Oliver Correct.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So, and I mean, not to mention that he met a little known rapper at Lounge.
Who's got like all the 100, like I think and every number one this year.
No, he's only the
Pretty much.
He's only the
He
number one
owns it.
Spotify.
Yeah.
He's the first Canadian artist to ever be the number one Billboard artist for the year 2018. He's the first Canadian artist, and Oliver and him always say that that's where they met. So Lounge lives on as something that, even though it's been gone for a minute, continues. And a lot of other people reference it, and a lot of other people from there have gone on. But obviously, the press that gets generated via those two guys is pretty major.
That is pretty major. And that kind of talks about like talent and managing talent. And obviously, with your guys' businesses, you guys have always had to manage talent. Talk to us a bit about that. I mean, did you guys take a bit of a hands-off approach in terms of talent? I mean, when you think about community, a lot of people end up community moderators and you're policing community. It doesn't seem like you guys had that policing kind of mentality.
That's an interesting take.
Well, ironically, Joel Riley, who's my business partner in Community 54, discovered Oliver.
Gotcha.
Discovered him, found him. He was probably hanging out at the store, trying to connect. That was the gig. You hung out at Lounge, and then you hoped that someone said, yo, come across the street,